I don't know what it is like to be a teacher in a secondary style classroom right now, in a traditional classroom, I would even say right now, or whatever a traditional classroom might look like in any sense of that, whatever that means for you, because that already in itself can mean a million and one things. That is to say, I have been teaching through private instruction and through nonprofits that are subcontracted for my entire teaching career, besides, I should say, the time that I taught directly at Francis Parker for a little bit, and Southwestern College for 8.5 years. But otherwise, I mean, teaching through, J Company Youth Theater based out of the JCC in La Jolla, or through San Diego Junior Theater classes based out of Casa del Prado in Balboa Park, private lessons from my own studio, as I call El Studio del BJ, just my music room in my home. And then now, obviously, a lot of this virtually, which has been its own escapades that I have certainly been in since March 25th. My birthday was in lockdown, and part of what I needed to do to keep my spirits up was to just keep myself busy. And so I taught voice lessons via Zoom, because I know that keeps me happy, and it did. It was a good thing to do. But I have only been able to talk to so many friends and colleagues, and help them kind of do the scatterbraining, just planning and coming up with option A, B, and C on how to execute and apply things in their classrooms. And several of them are starting this week. Several have already been in it. And I mean, I've heard the good, the bad, the ugly, the little successes, as I always like to refer to as the simple joys that are working, and then the things that are completely out of one's hands. And it's everywhere from trying to work with the students, to trying to work with the colleagues, to trying to work with the administration, to trying to just work with the internet, and technology, because no one saw such a large-scale shift to such few options of applying education. That's not something we've been in a world of diversifying and integrating technology, but then finding ways to let that even go into its own different ways, and some of it more advanced and other things a little bit more remedial. And it was always kind of the thought of, if things are going to collapse, we're going to collapse backwards, where it's like, all right, we're just back to books and candles. No one thought it would collapse forward of, well, we don't have enough materials, we can't touch things, and we can't get things passed around, so it's kind of make do with what you've got, order in what you can on your own. I even know from the educational side that it's, if your home has become your classroom, you've just taken on the electric, water, gas bills of your classroom. The school has not taken that on. So there are so many different shifts at play all at once. And that's okay. Because it has to be. Because if we don't accept that and acknowledge it to begin with, we're not going to start getting out of this hole. Because in addition to all of that, we have to be cognizant of that we are in a pandemic, and that will add further implications to people's actions and interactions on what can or can't you do within your homes, or where you can go, and that's for you and for your students, and for trying to obtain resources or transport resources. I know some schools are still doing things where students have to use packets of paper to fill out, and that requires going and picking up packets of paper and getting them back and getting them back in, and so there are infinite ways that the pandemic itself adds a level to this. And then there's another level. We're in this movement. We're still in this movement, and we can't forget, even though the rest of the world is literally on fire, we still can't forget that we have to also try and find ways to enact change upon what is it that we're actually teaching. Besides, how are we going to do it? And how are we going to grade it and evaluate it and make sure people have equal opportunity and access to it? But we still even have to look at, what is it? And, there was an interesting kind of bubble that happened at the start of our pandemic as schools were still in session through, winter, spring. There was a bubble in some cases where grading was kind of removed for a little while, and it allowed for, the gray zone of just trying to test things out and test waters. I don't believe we really have that bubble reforming right now. At least most institutions do not have an option to make a bubble like that reform. Some subcontracting institutions have that potential bubble, but I know certainly in terms of just grading systems, they're back because they have to be to an extent. With it, we have to try and find ways to, revise and reconsider the material being taught and those approaches to that material, which adds a whole another element, because there's the whole other web of red tape in trying to adjust curriculums. I'll leave it at that, but that's a whole nother ball. And still, we have to figure out what it is that we're capable of doing. What are we able to do at this point in time to help us impact the movement with mindfulness of the pandemic, with mindfulness of scattered resources and disparities as they already have been and as they're going to continue to be here and now for some time.